So cool. How many are not from Colorado?
Rise of the humans.
Have fun. Creativity, strategic thinking, problem solving.
This is one of my favorite sessions. If anyone is familiar, how many were here last year? And how many enjoyed SteveMo's session last year? That was fantastic. I mean, it was kind of a history lesson of how to be awesome and work in Salesforce. And so I'm so glad to have him back this year. So in the meantime, please welcome SteveMo.
Hi everybody, and thanks Chris for the introduction. So this is a thing I call formulas and life hacks for the everyday admin. They're just a collection of formulas that I've built in my own org or to answer questions that have been posted in the Salesforce Answers community that I just want to share with you because I think that they're all they can be applied in multiple use cases, whether you're a nonprofit, whether your business is B2B, B2C. They've just got a really broad application. So first, I want to give a huge shout out to our incredible sponsors. If you don't know me, my name's Steve Mollis, or if you are in the Salesforce Trailblazer community, you might know me as SteveMo. Tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a Salesforce MVP. I finally became a Trailhead Ranger, finally got that 100th Trailhead badge. I'm also a community college dropout, or as a friend of mine used to refer to it, daycare for 18 to 24-year-olds. I went to Bunker Hill Community College in Charlestown, Boston, and flunked out after 2 semesters. A self-taught Salesforce admin, and I'm also the proud owner of Parker Harris's Lightning Bolt, and I'm a world record holder. I hold the world record for the most times the speaker at Dreamforce has said the word fuck during their presentation. The previous record was 0, held by everybody else who has ever spoken at Dreamforce before or since. So Salesforce has told me, Salesforce has the forward-looking statement or safe harbor slide, so they've told me that I have to have my own one now. So like I said, the formulas I want to show you are simple formulas that can be applied. The first one I want to share with you is this one. This one, that is hands down the most complex formula I've ever written in my entire life. Somebody posted a question in the Answers community they needed to calculate the percentage of the current month that had passed and the percentage that was remaining so that they could do prorated invoicing. Show of hands, how many people need a formula like that in their org? 1. I will talk to you later. And next to it is, that's not Photoshop. That is a real thing. That is a Victorinox Swiss Champ V8TX pocket knife. It's got 84 blades. It weighs 1 pound and it costs 500 bucks. How many people need a 1 pound Swiss Army knife? How many people are going to drop 500 bucks on a Swiss Army knife? The formulas I'm going to show you today are not like that. They're like this. This is my favorite pocket knife. It opens bottles of beer and it opens bottles of wine. And I use it every single day because I'm a Salesforce admin. And that's what the formulas I'm going to show you are like this. I'm going to show you how to use a simple formula checkbox to test validation rule formula logic, how to use some basic math to simplify complex formulas, how to exempt users, roles, and profiles from validation rules, some little hidden things that are in the opportunity stage pick list field, and if we have time, I'm going to show you what I consider the greatest formula ever written. So before we begin, this is the formula editor. There's multiple formula editors in Salesforce. This is the one for validation rule formulas. There's one for formula fields on objects. The flow editor has its own formula editor. There's a formula editor for report formulas, summary formulas, and row formulas, and they're all more or less the same. They've got all these really cool buttons on there, and trust me, they are there to help you. They're not going to hurt you. I've written thousands of formulas over the years. I use these buttons all the time. The first one I want to show you is the insert field button. Very important if you're just getting into writing formulas. When you build a formula, no matter what that formula is, whether it's a flow trigger or a validation rule or a formula field, you got to use what's called the API field name. And if you're just getting started with Salesforce, this is a key thing. When the field name, the API field name, is not always going to be what you see when you're looking at a record. Perfect example of that is opportunity stage. The API field name is not stage. It's not opportunity stage. It's stage name with a capital S and a capital N and no blank space in between. And when you're writing a formula, that's what you got to use. I've written thousands of formulas. I use the insert field button all the time. Another one that I use all the time, the insert function button. When you select a function from that drop-down list, in the drop-down, in the pop-up, it shows you a representation of how you use that function and what it does. And there's a link to the online help and training that opens and shows you all the ins and outs of that function that you're about to use in that formula. All that information is right there, like one click away in the formula editor. And I use it all the time. So first one I want to show you is a little trick I came up with to test validation rule formula logic. So if you've ever written a formula, whether it's a formula field or a validation rule, in the formula editor, there's that little check syntax button. So you build your formula, you close your eyes, you make a wish, click that check syntax button. Hopefully you get a green message, not a red message. You're under the compile size limit. It's syntactically correct. That's great. But all that button does is check the syntax. It makes sure that you're not missing a comma or don't have extra commas, or you're missing a left or right paren or something like that, or you're not using an invalid function like an includes function on a checkbox field or something like that. It doesn't test the formula logic. And even I, community college dropout, remember from 7th grade algebra that A plus B in parentheses divided by C and A plus B divided by C will give you completely different and potentially bad results. But they're both syntactically correct. So one day, I got asked to update a validation rule. And this validation rule was on the opportunity object. And like, let's face it, opportunities are like the golden child of all Salesforce objects. I mean, you could royally fuck up activities, and people might not notice for like a day, a week, ever. You do something that screws up opportunities. You mess with somebody's commission or their pipeline. Before your finger comes off the mouse from hitting save on that formula, your inbox is filling up and your phone is ringing off the hook. And so, the formula I was updating was already one of the more complex ones that I'd ever written. And now I had to make some changes with it, and the changes involved like OR logic, and I always get a little bit scared about OR logic because you can create a loop or a loophole from which you're letting bad data in, or you're trapping the users in a loop from which they can never escape. And I was like, how do I really know that this stuff is tight? Like, I know it's syntactically correct, but how do I know that my logic is sound? Well, when you're writing a validation rule, you're basically writing a test. You're defining what is a bad record, what you want to block the user from doing and saving in the database. And it's Boolean. Either a record is good or a record is not good, just like a checkbox. Checkboxes are either true or false, a 0 or a 1, wax on, wax off. So on my opportunity object, I created a custom field. I selected formula as the data type, checkbox as my result type. And I put my validation rule formula in the checkbox formula. And if a record had a checked checkbox, that means that the record was bad as far as my validation rule is concerned. If the record had an unchecked checkbox, that meant the record was good as far as my validation rule was concerned. So suppose like we were writing a simple validation rule, like to block users from having an open opportunity with a close date in the past. Because the close date should always be like the expected decision date or the actual decision date of that opportunity. So the criteria would be pretty simple. If the close date is April 1st and today's date is August 31st, if the opportunity is won or lost, those are okay because you got people that have to touch that opportunity record after the deal's been closed. Shipping might have to put in the FedEx tracking number. Accounts receivable might have to put in the payment data, the invoice number. But if the opportunity is open, you want to block that user from saving that record, so it's going to fail. So there's a bunch of ways we could write that, but are they logically correct? So we might write it like this: close date is less than today, and it's not closed won or closed lost. I happen to be an and/or guy. I like using the text function to convert pick list fields. Some people use ampersands and double pipes. But there's a million ways you could write this formula. But are they logically correct? Well, let's find out. So instead of just putting this in a validation rule, clicking check syntax, and then activating it, I'm going to put this formula into my formula checkbox field. I check syntax. Sure, it's syntactically correct, but is it logically correct? So now I created a list view and a report that shows the fields that my formula is evaluating side by side and my formula checkbox. And I can tell right away I've got a problem. Those closed won and closed lost opportunities have a checkbox. That means they would fail my validation rule. If I activated this, shipping couldn't put the FedEx tracking number in there. Accounts receivable couldn't put in the payment data, the invoice number. They'd be blocked from doing their job. Does anyone know what I did wrong in my formulas? They were all syntactically correct, but what was the flaw in my logic? There are no prizes, by the way. That's what, winner, winner, chicken dinner. By putting my nots equals inside of an or, I created a loop from which no user could ever escape. Because when the user selected closed won, they didn't also at the same time select closed lost. If it's closed won, then it's not closed lost, so it fails. And if it is closed lost, it's not closed won, it fails. So I created a loop from which no user or opportunity record could escape. So I wrap all of my criteria inside of a single and clause, or using ampersands. I put my updated formula into my formula checkbox field, click check syntax, and now I can see that the only two records that have a checkbox are the ones that should have a checkbox. Open opportunities with a close date that is in the past. Now I can activate this validation rule with a sound mind. And the cool thing about this is, I just did it for this one case, but as I left it on there, and I realized that when people ask me to put a new validation rule in place or update an existing validation rule, I can run a report and I can show them, all right, here's a heads up, when we activate this thing on Friday, be ready because your team currently has 50 opportunities that are non-compliant, and so your users are going to start triggering validation rule errors because of this new rule. Just to give you a heads up, you know, your users are going to have questions for you on Monday morning. It's a little checkbox field I put in. And as soon as I did this, I put this on every single object in my org. And you only need one per object. You don't need one per validation rule. It's just a reusable field that you can put in your updated or new validation rule. Now, a couple of caveats. It is a formula field. Not every function that you can use in a validation rule can also be used in a formula field. You can't create a formula field that has is new in it, is changed, prior value, regex, or VLOOKUP. But if your validation rule doesn't include any of them, like the one that I built or the one that I showed you here, you can put the whole validation rule formula in there. And if it does have those functions, you can just comment them out and test the rest of your logic. Simple checkbox field. The next one I want to show you is one of my all-time favorites. It actually came from a question that was posted on the Answers community back in 2011 by a guy named Bart Ward. And Bart was trying to write a validation rule that would block users from moving the opportunity stage backwards. See, for Bart, the opportunity stages were like milestones. A deal could never go from cultivation to prospecting to proposal submitted back to prospecting. A deal could only move forward to its inevitable closure as a win or a loss. And he actually posted his first attempt at writing this formula. And he was using a function called isPickVal. isPickVal is a perfectly good function. Its sole purpose is to evaluate a pick list field like opportunity stage. You can also see that Bart had 17 different opportunity stages in his sales process. And he needed a separate isPickVal for each one of them. And like I said, isPickVal is a perfectly good function, but it's not the most efficient. It's like having an Alexa but you have to ask it the same question again and again. Alexa, what's it like outside? Are there zombies? Okay, run. Alexa, what's it like outside? Is it hot? Okay, let's go to the beach. Alexa, what's it like outside? Is it warm? Go hiking. And I figured out, in order for him to cover every single possible combination of or permutation of prior stage and possible current stage, he would have needed over 150 is-pick vals to cover all those. I guarantee that Bart would have either hit the compile size limit. Oh.
This is for all of us. We love you.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's a Frosty. Sláinte. So I figured out, Bart would have needed over 150 if-pick vals to cover all the combinations. I guarantee he would have either hit the 5K compile size limit, the 3,900 character limit, or he would have died of carpal tunnel syndrome before he got done writing that thing. But there's another function out there called case. This thing's hanging a little bit precipitously, or precariously. There's another function out there called case, and case is really cool because it works perfectly fine with pick list fields, but it also works with a whole bunch of other data types. But the cool thing is, it's much more efficient. You make one single call to the field, and you bring with it the entire list of values you're looking for and the entire list of outcomes that you want to return in one call. So here's what I did. I opened up a case function. I used the insert field button, inserted stage name, and I, as an admin, have access to the setup and config. I can see the complete list of pick list values in the stage pick list field. I copied and pasted them into the formula, and I know my sales process. I know, and also, for the sake of readability, I didn't want this to be like 2-point font and have Bart's 17 stages in there, so I simplified it for you guys. But I know that qualification is my first stage. I know that needs analysis is my second stage. So if qualification is selected, my case function is going to return the number 1. If a needs analysis is selected, my case is going to return the number 2. If the next stage is selected, it's going to return the number 3. Now you can see that I made closed won and closed lost both equal to 6. That's the highest number because they are both the last stage. Then I took the formula that I had written, the code that I had written, and I literally just copied and pasted it back into the formula editor. This is all one formula. But in my second case function, I wrapped a prior value function around the stage. Now I'm calling back the previous value that was in that stage. And I'm turning that from a pick list value or a word into a number. That's all I'm doing. I'm looking for a pick list value and turning a word into a number. And here's my complete formula. In between my two case functions, I added a not equals mathematic operator. There's my full formula. Even I, the community college dropout, knows that the number 1 is less than the number 2, 3, 4, and 5, and the number 2 is less than the numbers 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if a user tries to move an opportunity from proposal price quote back to value proposition, 3 is less than 4. They can't do that. That's it. I'm using 2 case functions and a prior value to turn words into numbers and performing basic math to cover over 150 possible permutations. That is my entire formula. And the cool thing is, I wrote that for Bart back in 2011. That question has over 200 follow-up questions posted because people see that and they've got slightly different requirements. So maybe you've got tiered stages and a deal can slide back and forth between stage 1, 2, and 3. But when it gets to the next plateau, it can only move from 4, 5 to 6. It can't go back to 1, 2, 3. Simple. You make your first 3 stages all 1. You make your next 3 stages all 2. You make your next 3 stages all 3. Or this one came up, they not only wanted to prevent people from going backwards, they wanted to prevent people from leapfrogging over stages. So I took what I wrote for Bart back in 2011, and I made 3 small changes. First of all, They wanted to allow users to move the deal straight to closed loss. Because face it, that's the reality. Sometimes you're cultivating or prospecting and you get a no, and no means no. You're not going to force a user to move the deal one stage by stage by stage just to get the closed loss. Because, well, first of all, your users are going to hate you, and second of all, you're going to be messing up all of your opportunity stage history reports. It's going to look like every deal made it all the way to negotiation before it got lost. That's not historically correct, and you want your data to be historically correct. So I add an exemption. They can move the deal straight. If the deal is not being moved to closed lost, then yes, invoke this rule and evaluate it. Again, I'm just evaluating the current stage and the previous stage, but I changed my less than operator to a not equals operator, and at the end of my prior value, I added +1. If the user is changing the stage and they're not going straight to closed lost, they can only move the opportunity to the next stage, one step. They can't go two, and they can't go backwards at all. And again, case statements turning words into numbers in basic math. And like I said, like, that thing has been up there for 12 years now, and I can't count the number of like variations on this thing I built for Bot, and it's just basic math. Another cool thing though, and this one comes up a lot, a way that I've used this little trick I came up for Bot. You know, you'll see people that will have a validation rule, like say they've got an approval process, and so it updates a checkbox field. But if the deal is over $50,000 and hasn't been approved, they can't move it to proposal. Well, that's great, but what if you have stages after proposal? Price quote, contract review, closed one. If this is just your validation rule, and you don't have the other rule in place that forces them to go one stage at a time, if you don't have that, this is not going to prevent someone from skipping right past proposal and shoving through an unapproved deal worth over $50,000. So here's how I would write that. And I see that formulas like that all the time in the answers community. Using the trick I wrote for Bot, I turn my stages from words to numbers. And I basically just say, if the current stage is greater than or equal to the number 4, and it's not approved and it's more than $50,000, they're blocked from saving the record. They got to get approval. And you don't have to do the whole, that's the way I like to write it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can just include only the stages that you want to invoke the rule and turn them just into ones. And basically say, if the stage is equal to 1, it's one of my 4 stages, and it's not approved, and it's worth more than $50,000. There's dozens of different ways you can use this, but the whole trick goes back to 2011 in that formula I wrote for Bot. It's words into numbers and basic math. Another way that I've used this over the years is, you know, sometimes you write a validation rule, but there's certain users that you don't want to apply the rule to. Like you've got a department, like, you know, you've got people that their job function requires them to like do mass updates. And if you've got like a bunch of, you know, opportunities that have like a non-compliant date, like you don't want to force them to like just shove a bad value in there just so they can do their job. Like you've got people that, you know, their job function, they don't know like all the details of the deal, but they've got to do like a mass update, so you've got to exempt them. So using the formula editor, when you click that insert field button, you'll also see these things with the dollar signs on them when you see like the field menu. Those are global variables. And there's a couple that I use all the time. Dollar profile, dollar user role. What those are, dollar profile, dollar user role, that is the user who is currently logged in at that moment in that session interacting with that record. Whichever way they are interacting with it. They're running a report, looking at the results, they're dollar user. They're creating a record, they're dollar user. They're editing a record, they're dollar user. They're looking at a list view, they're dollar user. If we were all logged into the same org right now, in your session, you're dollar user. In your session, you're dollar user. In your session, you're dollar user. So one word of advice though, I see people write formulas and they'll use the insert field button. but they'll grab like the user ID or the profile ID or the role ID. Please, for the love of God and the baby seals, don't use hard-coded IDs if you can avoid it. Use the record type name or the username. There cannot be two users in the entire Salesforce universe that have the same username, and users can't edit their own username to get around the validation rule. Use username or role name or profile name or record type name. Don't do it for me, do it for the baby seals. So suppose we had a validation rule, do you own SteveMo a beer equals false. Well, I don't want to apply that to everybody. I mean, I got my buddies, the Three Stooges, Mo, Larry, Curly, and don't forget Shemp. I want to exempt them from the rule. But I don't want to wrap my exempt users inside of an OR, because just like the opportunity stage pick list field, a user can only have one username. A user can only have one user role. So by wrapping them inside of an OR, I also create the loop from which no one can escape unless they're Schrodinger's cat, and then all bets are off. So I could write it like this. Do you owe me a beer equals false, and you're not me, you're not Mo, you're not Larry, you're not Curly, and you're not Shemp. Then, yeah, you can't save this record unless you owe me a beer. But using the trick that I learned from Bot, what if I make one call to the username field using a case function, and I take my 4 users who are exempt and I make them 1? If the user who's editing this record is not one of those 5 exempt users, they can't save the record. And you can do it with profile or user role. And here's the thing, very few orgs only have like a handful of roles. I mean, how many people got more than 10 user roles? How many people got more than 20 user roles? Yeah. So I'm a crappy typist. Every time I make a keystroke, it's an opportunity for disaster. So I always say, whatever is the smaller number, I put that in my formula. So if I want to exempt sales operations, finance, and facilities from this validation rule, I put them in my validation rule and turn them into a 1, and anybody who is a 0 is not exempt. But say I only wanted to invoke this validation rule for 3 profiles, I would make my non-exempt roles a 1 and say equals 1. If the person editing this record is in one of those 3 roles, they will trigger the validation rule. The other 30, 40, 50 roles, they're exempt. So whatever is a smaller number, put them in your formula. That's just my personal preference. So this next one I want to show you, this has a little admin tale of woe behind it, and it's my tale of woe. I'm a self-taught admin, and some of those lessons that I've taught myself over the years have been learned the hard way. And one of those things was, as my org expanded and we added more and more departments, more and more sales teams, we'd acquire a company, onboard their users, they'd come to me and be like, yeah, the opportunity page layout doesn't really fit the way we need some custom fields. Oh, yeah. In your stages, that's not really the way that me and my team sell things. We've got these stages. And not knowing any better, I gave it to them. And then I gave it to the next team. And they couldn't even find common ground on what to call a win. One team was perfectly fine with the standard Salesforce closed 1. Another team wanted to simplify it and just call it win. Another team didn't like win. They liked the past tense. They wanted to call it 1. Another team came to me and said, the users don't instinctively know what the default probability for each of the stages in. Can you have the stage pick list value actually have a hyphen in the probability displayed next to it? Sure. Not knowing any better. Then another team saw that and said, we like that. We want that. But couldn't you put the probability in front of the words? Sure. And this was fine for them because when they ran a sales pipeline report, they were only seeing their opportunities. They only saw their stages. But when my CFO came to me and said, hey, Steve, I need an opportunity pipeline report, I had to show him this piece of shit with a straight face and try and keep my job. Now, I have a saying. If you build someone a report or a dashboard, and the person who is looking at that report or dashboard has to pull out a piece of paper and a pencil or a calculator to figure out what that report or dashboard is saying, you built a shitty report. And I didn't want to be known as the guy who builds shitty reports. I mean, like, the closed won opportunity is in 5 different columns because there's win, won, closed won, 100%, 100% won. Like there's a 90% won somewhere. So, and this was way, way back once upon a timey time. This was like before report bucketing or any of those cool things that we have now. And now, as an admin, when you create a new opportunity stage, as I certainly did 30 fucking times, you'll notice that it's not just a regular pick list value. You can't just shove some text in there and be done. Salesforce says, no, no, no. You got to give me some other information. You got to tell me what the default probability of this stage is. You've got to tell me what the default forecast category of this stage is, and you got to tell me what type of stage this is. And there are only 3 options in that pick list value: open, closed won, and closed lost. No matter how many opportunity stages you have, no matter how many opportunity record types you have, no matter how many sales processes you have, every single stage is either open, closed won, or closed lost. And what Salesforce does with those behind the scenes, when a user selects that stage and hits save, Salesforce grabs that stage, checks what you define that type as, and sets 2 hidden checkbox fields on the opportunity record. The opportunity object has 2 checkbox fields, is closed and is won, and Salesforce sets them. Now, some people might be saying, wait a minute, I just solved that closed date validation rule problem. I don't care what the stage is, I'm just going to say is closed equals false. Salesforce, they don't say why, but Salesforce does specifically say do not use is closed or is won in validation rule formulas. They don't say why, but they do have it in the help. They're telling you not to use it. My guess, and it's just a guess, is that it's because of something called the Salesforce order of operations. Between the moment a user clicks the save button, the new button or the edit button, makes their changes, and clicks save, and that record gets committed to the database, there's like 32 different things that happen. Visual Force code gets called up. Apex code gets called up. All these things happen. My guess is that there's this moment between the user selecting closed won, hitting save, the record being evaluated by the validation rule, and those 2 checkbox fields actually being set to true. And so you'll be in this, the record for this split second will be in this state where it's closed won, but the 2 checkboxes are false, and the validation rule is going to look at it and say, you're good to go, and the ship has sailed. So you can't use is closed or is won in a validation rule formula. But getting back to my tale of woe. So report buckets were not a thing, and I had to figure out a way to present that opportunity pipeline report to my boss and keep a straight face and my job. So here's what I did. I created a custom formula field on the opportunity object, and I wrote this. It's called a nested if. If you've never used a nested if, it basically works on the if, then, else principle. If is 1 equals true, then return the word 1. If it's not 1, then go back and evaluate the record again and check to see if it is not closed. Is closed equals false. If it's not closed, then that means that it's open. So return the word open. And if it's not 1 and it's not open, then it can only be a loss. So just return the word lost, and then I close it out with 2 parens because every nested if has to be closed out. So that's my formula. And it's a simple formula, but word of advice, no matter how simple you think your formula is and how good you think you are at writing formulas, always create a report or a list view that shows the fields your formula is evaluating side by side and your formula result. So I knew that my formula was sound. This is the same report we started with. But now, all of our revenue is grouped into 3 nice, neat buckets. No paper, no pencil, no calculator. My CFO can see how much money is open, how much money is won, how much money is lost. Now, that's great, but you can use those is closed and is won checkboxes actually in a report to get the count of open, the count of closed and the count of won, but there's no count of open or lost. And that formula field that I built is great, but it eats up a report grouping. And that's a precious commodity. You can only have 2 column groupings and 2 row groupings in a matrix report, or 3 row groupings in a summary report. And sometimes you get opportunities with products and line items report, and they want to see the product name and the account type or the account industry or the lead source. You start burning through those report groupings, and suddenly things, you run out of room. So how can we do this without burning one of those precious report groupings? So on my opportunity object, I created 2 custom formula checkboxes. I call the first one open, and that's my formula. Is closed equals false. I created another one called lost, and it's a formula that returns a checkbox if the opportunity is closed, but the opportunity is not won, then return a checkbox. Now I can get not only the count of closed and won, I can get the count of open, closed, won, and lost. So I built that, and then along come report summary formulas. So now I can get the percentage of opportunities that are open, the percentage of opportunities that have been closed and won, the percentage of opportunities that have been won using my formula checkbox field and some basic division. This is still the report we started with. And all I've done is use a couple of formula checkbox fields that are driven by the standard opportunity stage pick list. But that's great, but sometimes you don't really care that much about the number of opportunities that are won, because face it, if you're closing a bunch of small deals, eventually you're going to run out of business. You want to see the percentage of money that's been won, the percentage of money that's been lost, the percentage of money that is still out there, still open. So I created 4 more. These are all formula fields on the opportunity object. And some people get freaked out when I say formula field on the opportunity object or this object, because they're like, I don't want my page layouts looking like a race car at the Daytona 500 with all these formula fields all over them. You don't need, if it's a formula field, you don't need to put it on the page layout. You just need to give the user read access to the field so that they can use that data in reports. Keep the fields you need on the page layout, and don't put the ones that you don't need the user to see on, if they're looking at the opportunity, they can see what the stage is, they can see what the amount is, and they can hopefully they can figure out whether the money is open, closed, won, or lost. So you don't need to put these fields on the page layout. So these are all the same. They're all formulas. They all return a currency as a result. And the first one is dollar amount open. And I simply say, if is closed equals false, that standard checkbox field that Salesforce already sets for me, then display whatever is in the amount field. Otherwise, display the number 0. Then I wrote the next one, dollar amount closed. If is closed equals true, show me the dollar amount. Otherwise, give me a 0. Dollar amount won. If is won equals true, show me the dollar amount. Otherwise, show me a 0. Dollar amount lost. If is closed equals true and is won equals false, show me the dollar amount. Otherwise, show me a 0. Now, I can display, and I've only got one grouping, opportunity owner. If my boss comes to me and says, I want to see this by lead source, I want to see this by product, I want to see this by account type or opportunity type, I can give them all those, plot that all in this report, because I'm not burning through a single row or column grouping using these formula fields. And I can show them the dollar amount open, the dollar amount closed, the dollar amount won, the dollar amount lost. And now I can create report summary formulas that show the percent of money won by using my opportunity amount open field and dividing it by the standard opportunity amount field, or my opportunity amount won field divided by my opportunity amount closed, or my amount lost divided by my amount closed. This is still the very same report we started with, and not only can I show them the count of opportunities that have been won, the count of opportunities that have been closed, the count of opportunities that have been won, the count of opportunities that have been lost, the amount of money open, the amount of money closed, the amount of money won, the amount of money lost. I can show them the percent of revenue open, the percent of revenue closed, the percent of revenue won, the percent of revenue lost. All using those 2 checkbox fields that are set by the opportunity stage pick list field. So looks like we got a little bit of time, so I'm going to sneak in what I consider to be the greatest formula ever written. It wasn't written by me. It was written by a guy named Tom Tobin, who was one of the analytics product managers at Salesforce. And I learned this at my very first Dreamforce back in 2009 at a hands-on analytics workshop that he was presenting. He showed this, and my jaw hit the floor. So a lot of people attribute the power of one to me, but I learned it from Tom. I just say, like, I'm his humble apostle spreading the gospel of the power of one. So without further ado, it's a custom field, it's a formula field, and I create this, no lie, on every single object in my org. I have it on the opportunity, account, contact, lead, activity, case, opportunity, product, line item, product, user. Everything has a power of one field. When I create a custom object, the first field I add is a power of one field. So you're going to select formula as your data type, number is your result type. Please, for the love of God, don't name your power of one fields power of one. I see people in the Answers community that they'll email me. It's like, I'm using this power of one thing that you showed, but I can't figure out what it's telling me in this report. And I take a look at the report. It's like they've named every single one of their power of one fields power of one. I'm like, how do you know what you're counting with this thing? I personally name my power of one after the object that I'm creating it on, because that's how I'm going to use it. But it's your org. Go with God. Name it whatever you want. Another thing, just select 0 decimals. Some people actually use decimals. It's just a whole number. Just select 0 decimals. And now here's the formula. Or for you way, way, way in the back, seriously, that's it. It's just a 1. That's it. That's the power of one. So what's so friggin' great about it? I mean, like, you create the power of one on an opportunity record, you hit save, then you open up an opportunity, and there's your power of one field looking back at you. Hi, I'm a 1. Like, yeah, great. So here's what's so great about it. This is a plain vanilla opportunities with product line items report, and I'm using the standard built-in report builder total records. I've got 1,251 records. But what? 1,251 opportunity owners? Well, I flunked out of community college, but I think I can count to 6. Maybe not. 1,251 accounts that have an opportunity, 1,251 opportunities, 1,251 products? Your guess is as good as mine. The only way to tell for sure is to take your phone off the hook, cancel your meetings for the rest of the day, click Show Details, and count the number of rows one by one and hope that you don't lose track or die of carpal tunnel syndrome. This is the same report. The second I hit save on that formula field, on the opportunity object and the user object and the account object and the opportunity product object, every single record on my org, even though my org was created in 2003, every single existing record has a 1 in that field. And every record that is created from the moment after I hit save will have a 1 in that field, for as long as the stars burn bright in the nighttime sky and the sun rises. And the second I hit save, that field became available in every report type of those objects, including every existing report that I already built, including reports that went back to 2003. I click Customize. There is my Power of One field, readily available in the field menu on the left. I just grab my user Power of One field. I grab my account Power of One field. I grab my opportunity Power of One field. I grab my opportunity product Power of One field. And I select Summarize Sum. Now I can see, yes, even though I flunked out of community college, I can in fact count to 6. There are 6 users who own an opportunity. There are 41 accounts that have an opportunity. There are 1,067 opportunities in this report. 546 of them are open. 521 are closed. 124 are won. 397 are lost, and there are 315 opportunity product line items in it. This is the very same report that we started with. I can get the count of open, closed, won, lost, users, accounts, opportunities, opportunity products, the amount won, the amount open, the amount closed, the amount lost, the percent open, the percent closed, the percent won, the percent lost. All using 2 standard checkbox fields and the number 1. You can do some incredibly powerful things using the simplest of formulas, and that's what I wanted to share with you guys. So, thanks a lot. Do you guys want Q&A? Yeah. Okay, sure, shoot.
Can you tell us a joke?
A joke? Oh, man. I don't know if I can tell you a joke. Oh, all right, this isn't like a joke. This is like an admin true horror story.
That's the same thing.
So, true story. I had a user one time telling me that like Salesforce was all fucked up, and that all their records just like disappeared, gone. I was like, what? That's never happened before, never. Like, and they didn't really have any details. Just like everything's gone. Like all my records are gone, my accounts are gone, my leads are gone, my opportunities are gone. And I was like, what the fuck? And I immediately started like, what could I have done to do this? And I was like, I bet I did a data load and I screwed something up. I bet I did a data load and I either transferred ownership of the records or I just, oh fuck, did I delete them all? Holy crap. How do I undo this? How do I figure this out? I'm like racking my brain, like what could I have done to cause this thing? And then, I started poking around. I was like, wait a minute, the records are still there. But yeah, like they're owned by this other person. And I was like, but how did that happen? I pulled every import file that I had them saved in a folder, and I went through every single one, looking at opportunity IDs, owner IDs, looking for like the bad load that I had done. Couldn't find anything. And I'm looking at these reports and looking at that report and that, trying to untangle this mess. And I was looking at a report. I grouped it by opportunity owner. And something just seemed a little bit off. There was like 2 groupings for like the same name. Like, why is that? I clicked show details, clicked on the opportunity name, clicked on the user lookup field opportunity owner down into the user detail record. I'm looking around. It's like last modified by the user. Why would a user be making a change to their user record? Like usually they come to me if like they get married or divorced or their title, like, the fuck could have gone wrong? I started fucking, and I called them and I got them on the phone and I was like, can you tell me when you noticed that Salesforce got all fucked up? Like, then they started to get real evasive and vague. Tuesday? Really? What time on Tuesday? Late morning? Like maybe around like 11:15? Maybe. Because that's the time that you modify your user detail record. And can you tell me what you were modifying on your user detail record? So, turned out that they were trying to transfer ownership of one opportunity record to another person. But rather than click that change link that's next to the owner name on the opportunity record, rather than do that, rather than just call or email me and ask me how to do it or ask me to do it, or check the Salesforce online help for how do you transfer ownership of a record. Now, the solution that these 2 bozos came up with was, I'm going to log into my record, my user record, and I'm going to change my name to your name. I shit you not. Like, I never thought that I would need to create a validation rule that would prevent a user from editing their first and last name fields on their user detail record, but I was wrong. And that's the first thing I did after I hung up the phone. I was like, tactics of validation rule. You two and all the other users are in validation timeout. You know, you get married, divorced, promoted, you come to me, I'll update your user rec. True story. Anybody got an admin horror story? Anybody, what have your users done that are just like, holy crap, how did they do that? How did they think to do that? And what made them think that that was a good idea? Anyone? Anyone got?
I'm sure there's plenty of that, but Steve, I want to know, like, what did you say to that person? Did you just hang up the phone? Like, I don't think I could have kept my composure once I would have pieced it together.
I honestly, I was so dumbfounded that I just like hung up the phone. I couldn't even like, it was one of those things where like, you just can't even wrap your head around like a comeback. And so I just like, but that is hands down, that and this one time I had a user years ago, like the old Outlook plugin, the one that you used to have to install on your desktop. We had this user who was having all kinds of problems with the Outlook plugin, and so I'd coach her through installing. And I think it was like they were West Coast and they worked remote, and so the help desk would need to remote desktop into her laptop, and the help desk didn't really deal with Salesforce. I'm the Salesforce admin developer, so I would have to get on the phone with the help desk, coach them into downloading the Outlook client software, and it was all these things were like, well, maybe it's the current version is so old, because sometimes there would be these things like, well, you can't skip too many updates, or you'll actually have to, you won't be able to update it, you'll have to delete the whole thing and do a clean install. And then there's like all these like MSI files that you gotta manually clean up. There's like, we're doing all this, like, nope, still not working, still not working. Weeks go by, weeks turn into months, still not working. One day, I get this email from her, and it was like, still not working, question mark, and like 9 exclamation points. And I was like, what is wrong with this thing? And so I was like, I never really asked the question. So I wrote her back, and I took a screenshot of like my Outlook inbox with the Salesforce button there, add the Salesforce button in the toolbar. And it's like, okay, but can you tell me like what actually isn't working? Like what happens when you are in an email and you click the add to Salesforce button? And I shit you not, she emailed me back, OMG, exclamation point. I never noticed the button before. The whole time the thing had been perfectly installed. She just thought that she's in her email and Salesforce is just going to magically transport her email from Outlook at the Salesforce on the fly. Like, I'm not kidding. Months and months of phone calls and emails and Zoom calls and remote desktops. And she didn't know the button was in the toolbar. That's why Salesforce admins drink.
Cheers to that. Cheers. SteveMo, just real quick, will you be sharing your slide deck?
It will be available in all of its resplendent glory. I'll get it to you guys as soon as I wrap up.
Perfect, thank you. SteveMo!